Magic can change your life forever. It continues to transform mine over and over again. This video shares some of my first experiences with the Ars Arbatel and all the developments that came from those encounters. If one follows the ceremonial magic path, he or she will most likely eventually work with entities. A lot of ceremonial magic regards the spiritual techniques to be able to summon/evoke spirits, elementals, angels, or whatever other class of entity. But it's also true that we have a bunch of different systems of magic, all of those being part of this ceremonial strand. The Arbatel, although not as famous nowadays, has deep influence over the Western tradition of magic. Dr. Justin Sledge argues that before the Golden Dawn, and the whole work Matters did translating old grimoires, the Arbatel was the most widely practiced medieval grimoire. Only after Matters's books, we found a new notoriety to many grimoires more widely used nowadays, such as the Ars Goetia, which deals with demons. And I also have a video about my experiences with that system for you to watch later. I'll put it at the end as a recommendation. Before we get to the stories themselves, I must say, I see the Arbatel as an extremely safe and beneficial system to use. Even the philosophy that serves as the basis for the system is profoundly beautiful. The book begins with 49 aphorisms, where we learn, amongst other things, that the magician should work to the benefit of the entire world. So the Arbatel is a system that shouldn't be used to one's own benefit, but for whole communities or groups of people. It's also clear that this system is not meant to harm people, and that if one contacts the entities from the Arbatel for egotistical or aggressive purposes, they will be the one facing the power of the spirits. This is of course a very Christian form of magic, which doesn't say much because even Goetia draws from Christianity and their exorcism methods. But the Arbatel reflects a much purer and light view of reality, very much based on solidarity, love, and kindness, making it one of the safer traditions that deal with entities, at least in my opinion and out of the ones I have worked with so far. I'm doing this big introduction because my videos so far have been sharing my old experiences, while I give a spiritual path that anyone can follow, and if done so properly, I'm sure will guide you towards your own magical experiences. Go back to my first videos on magic and follow the suggestions and the book recommendations, and you too will be walking that path. If you already began meditating and have practice with safer forms of magic, those that don't include contacting spirits, and you now feel ready to begin this next part of your journey, I think the spirits of the Arbatel or the Kabbalistic archangels are a good place to begin. But especially the Arbatel, because although I see them as a type of angel that's always one with divine will, never against it, they also have a bit of a denser, energetic signature, which makes them easier to feel and interact with than the archangels, which require more developed astral senses. So if you are following the path I'm teaching, after doing the sigils, meditating, reading the books, and having made a protection servitor, the Arbatel feels like the perfect system to begin. Dealing with spirits and entities. With all that out of the way, it's time to share my personal experiences with some of these spirits. Once again, from a few years ago when I was experimenting with it. Being a system composed of light beings, the Arbatel is especially suited for theurgical work, focusing on your spiritual development. But although that's what I feel they're best at, they can also work towards manifesting your wishes, making them a great system of magic, one that provides one Olympian spirit ruling each of the old astrology planets. And being the moon the closest to us, it fits this video that my first story beat with Phul, the Olympic ruler of Luna. I did a simple evocation, and After doing so, I felt a coldness invade the room. With this new chilly feeling around, I understood that he had very quickly answered my call, and I began talking to him. He was kind, and at no point I felt scared or any aggressiveness coming from him, different than what I had felt in my previous Goetia evocations. At that point, I shared my intent with Phul, which at the time was to develop my astral senses, improve my abilities as a medium. Specifically, I wanted to begin seeing the astral, which at the time I could only listen to. I didn't make it the purpose of the ritual, but in my mind, I kind of already knew that once I got to see the astral, I would probably want to experiment with astral traveling. At the time, I had never done anything close to it, barring one very accidental lucid dream I had during adolescence that I was never able to reproduce. For most of my life, I didn't even believe in astral travel, but since my magic journey had shown me a lot thus far, I felt that this could be possible too. I didn't ask him for a familiar, but he felt the best approach towards what I asked was to give me one. So he made the connection between me and one of the spirits he commands, told me his name and bound it to me so that he'd be with me at all times, so that at the very least I could just ask him and talk to him without more involved ritual for evocation. He was an elemental dealing with two elements, air and water. After this ritual, I began having very minor impressions in my mind's eye. I began being able to summon an entity and picture it inside my imagination, which already allowed for a deeper connection during my rituals. But if I'm being honest, it was very few images and with very little movement, just enough to gather a bit more information on the spirits I worked with. A few weeks after this ritual, I eventually contacted the Archangel of Yesod, Gabriel, in what was at the time still my first contacts with Kabbalistic archangels, and I asked him to learn and have a better understanding of astral traveling, how it works, most importantly, how to do it. So although we're sharing a full story, if I'm being completely transparent, it kind of became like a tag team job between Gabriel and Phul, and of course, Phul's familiar. But it was Gabriel that got me to better understand that the astral represents aspects of our minds, and that we can use the imagination as a portal to interact and eventually experience the astral realm. If it was not for Gabriel giving me the philosophical understanding of how this works and how such a simple method was so capable, I probably wouldn't be able to do the astral traveling, or at least it would have taken me a while longer. After around a month and a half of these visions growing stronger and stronger, beginning to have movement and more detail, the familiar told me that it was time for astral traveling. So I lay down to meditate and try to leave my body. I wasn't able to. Then he told me to imagine a ball of light between my eyebrows to house my consciousness, and simply imagine it leaving. Then I spent a few minutes looking at the room and my surroundings and myself from the perspective of the floating ball. It was something so simple, it could feel like I was lying to myself, tricking myself. He then took me around the neighborhood and taught me how to feel the astral around any place. He told me I wouldn't see the material world while doing it, but I could feel danger or spiritual energy or attraction or a whole range of different sensations. After a few days training around my neighborhood, the familiar told me to select a few celestial bodies of my interest. So I did some research and I found some bright stars amongst the constellations and took note of where I wanted to go. After the beginning process, he told me to fly upwards instead of staying around my neighborhood, until I could see nothing but a cosmic background, black with some stars. He was flying with me and I could see him in the astral. I would follow him and he would lead me to the stars I wanted to go. But first he took me to the moon and told me I could contact Phul this way. Only then he took me to the stars I chose. The last one wasn't even a star, it was a black hole, and it was so far away that we had to teleport there somehow. He brought me to a particular star that had this capability, and that star brought me to the last one, the black hole. Upon arrival, I could see its accretion disk spinning, and around it, much debris also flowing very intensely. I could feel the debris hitting me. I could feel the movement around me. I could feel the draw that it had on me. The sensation was physical, as if my body was there. Until then, I was still afraid of being just tricking myself with imaginary tricks, but that sensation was so immediate and so real that from that moment on I felt confident on the practice that Phul had guided me to learning, and that of course the familiar was deeply responsible for making me able to actually do it. The work of Phul and his familiar was stupendous. Within less than 2 months I had achieved everything I asked him. I'm deeply thankful to Phul and the entirety of the Arbatel, to be fair. The next 2 stories are somewhat shorter. The very first Arbatel experience I had was with Och, the Olympian spirit of the sun. After the evocation I felt heat. The room became hot, I began sweating, and it wasn't a very hot day so far. And of course at the end it wasn't hot anymore, just during the ritual itself. Och, the sun spirit, made his presence felt in such fashion. My goal with this ritual was to have my first familiar spirit. I had worked with Goetia before and wondered about familiar spirits, but had never trusted them enough to leave one of their familiars with me on the day-to-day. So I have never asked for anything like that, and that's what I asked Och. He agreed and gave me a name. He also told me that the familiar was already around us and that I should talk to it, begin a proper relationship. So we spent a few minutes getting to know each other. I also took note of his specialties, one of which felt interesting, and I decided to test it. He told me he was a barrier specialist. He could also help in health issues, but his main thing was creating and maintaining spiritual barriers. So I asked one for my house, and as soon as I asked for it, I heard something click inside the house. Similar to when a wooden closet settles and does a loud noise, but it was even louder. Later, when other people arrived, the car did the exact same sound. Both of them sounded like they were coming from the physical plane, which is totally different than how I listened to the entities. It was weird, but I didn't make much meaning of it. Maybe just a coincidence. That is, until I tested with other people. At the time I was teaching someone and offered to put a barrier on his house too, and he agreed. So I asked the familiar and told the person that I was doing it. The light from his house, and according to him, in his entire building, it was just his house that had this phenomenon. The light went out and it stayed out for a few minutes, enough for him to see that the neighbors still had electricity. And when he came back, everything was normal, nothing was broken or deactivated or anything. A few more days later, when sharing this story with a friend of mine, I offered him the same barrier, and he also accepted. When I was asking the familiar, we both heard what sounded like a rat sound. It was like a tiny sound. We both heard it. We were a bit startled. I personally thought it was a rat, so I was scared of the rats. But we moved everything that was around us. There was nothing there, just, inanimate things. But this time it wasn't just me that heard it. It was 2 people. When he was going back home from that day, he heard the same sound in the car. And upon arrival, he heard the clicks inside the house. So I ended up feeling like that's a characteristic of the barrier and the work of this particular familiar that makes physical effects when being installed or being used. To this day, I still feel safer knowing that I have the barrier in my house. And once again, as usual, I'm very thankful to both Och and his familiar. The last story concerns Bethor, the Olympic spirit of Jupiter, to whom I asked for expansion of my magical power. This story happened a few months after the other two, just so you know, within the timeline of my life. Bethor had the sweetest energy. He was kind and loving. He showed up as a ball of blue light. I felt deeply, deeply loved during our conversations. He called me son throughout the whole ride, and I truly felt a loving, calm, fatherly presence, which is something I don't remember feeling from my biological father. I could feel that he truly cared for me and wanted the best for me, and he also felt like the kind of spirit that would be loving and kind to anybody. It was like love and mercy is what he is his very essence. Well, keep in mind that I really do love Jupiterian energy, so maybe I'm more inclined to feeling it with so many good sensations because I go well with Jupiterian energy. But I kind of think that's his vibe. Everything he would speak was so much loving and with such deep care. It's hard to explain even. At the end of our conversation, he told me he would give me a present. And in my mind's eye, he manifested a scepter. It was white, as if made of marble, had gold details, and what looked like a mini black hole at the top. He told me that's the scepter of Bethor, and that he was giving it to me. He taught me a visualization process to see it in my mind's eye, and how to begin using it. He told me I can use it as a magic wand for a ritual, in case I don't have the physical thing, and he also taught me 2 things to do with it. One simple method for creating a temporary servitor with a single objective that gets dissolved upon completion, and one for creating astral talismans that I could carry with me or give to people, but those are somewhat more limited. He told me they would only last 3 to 4 months, 4 being the absolute limit, and that they're not a substitute for a physical talisman, but it's a quick magical fix for small things and can help in small situations and help guide people towards certain things or help a certain type of energy to reach a person, at least for the 4 months. So I came out of the work with Bethor not only having had my first astral item, right, something that I could just imagine and use it in my magical practice, and 2 magical abilities of how to use it and influence the world around me. But I must be fair, out of the 3 stories I shared, the first 2 are much more integral for my personal magical journey nowadays, especially the first one because astral traveling has become a big part of my journey. But as usual, I'm very blessed and very thankful for all my spiritual experiences, and I truly love being able to do a certain evocation process and call an intelligence outside of myself. Well, maybe you can think of it as parts of ourselves. It doesn't change much. Still from parts of myself that are outside of the boundaries of the individual and that can teach us stuff and help us achieve things and help us expand our knowledge and power. So truly a beautiful system. I really enjoy working with them. Nowadays my practice with them has changed a bit because I unified my whole planetary work. So when I work with them nowadays, I usually also work with the planetary intelligences and spirits from Agrippa, which is another video I have out, and go check it out. Everything I learned from Agrippa. It's an important book. It's a good video to watch. I hope you enjoy it. And that closes the stories I wished to share in this video here. Thank you for watching so far. I'm leaving 2 videos for you to keep exploring magic, and please leave a like and share this to people who would be interested in my experiences and learning a bit more of how magic works. Much bliss and love to all of you. Don't forget to leave a like. Goodbye.